Hello, and thank you for attending the brief NARCAN training. We're going to quickly review this sheet that I'm going to share on the screen, and then I'll show you how to use the NARCAN itself. So NARCAN or naloxone is a medication that works to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. NARCAN is the brand name. That is what we hand out. We hand out NARCAN nasal spray. Naloxone is the generic name, and it can come in lots of different ways to administer it. But like I said, we hand out NARCAN, the nasal spray. So it's a medication that reverses the effects of opioid overdoses, and it works really effectively on opioids. It's going to take effect in about 30 to 45 seconds. Now, it will only work on opioids. So when we're talking about opioids, we're talking about a class of drugs that include illegal drugs such as heroin or synthetic opioids like fentanyl, and then pain relievers as well, like oxycodone, hydrocodone, Percocet, all of that. It will reverse the effects of any of those opioids, any kind of opioid. Some opioids are stronger than others. Fentanyl, for example, is quite strong. Sometimes you may need more than one dose of NARCAN to reverse the opioid. It's a lot of opioids in the person's system. So there are some House bills that are worth mentioning, some laws that are in place. First of all, there's the immunity from civil liability. This is the same as the Good Samaritan law, which if you've been through CPR training is the same law. It basically says that if you are working to try and revive a person, if you are trying to help a person, you are not liable for the outcome of that person's life. You're not civilly liable for that. There's also a standing order at all pharmacies, which means that any of us can go to any pharmacy in Virginia and ask for NARCAN or naloxone. It's behind the pharmacy counter, so you do have to ask the pharmacist for it. And most insurances cover it with a copay. If you have a Medicaid plan, all Medicaid plans cover it without a copay. And then finally, the Safe Harbor law. This law just took effect on July 1st, 2020, so it's a brand new law. What it states is that no person is subject to arrest or prosecution for substance-related charges if they're overdosing or if they help someone who is overdosing, if they call for help for someone who's overdosing. And this covers all substances. So this covers underage drinking, this covers any other kind of illegal substance like cocaine, PCP, all of that. It also covers any kind of paraphernalia, covers public intoxication as well. So what this means is that if you call to get somebody assistance who's overdosing, or if you're overdosing and someone calls to get you assistance, you are not subject to arrest for those substance-related crimes. So how can we identify an overdose? You can see on this sheet that there's lots of different kind of pointers to how to know if someone's overdosing. The primary one I want to alert you to is over here, not responsive or sleeping and can't be woken up. So if someone's not responsive, then they're likely overdosing, and we want to administer NARCAN. We can check for responsiveness by giving a sternum rub. So you put your fist out like this with your knuckles out and you rub up and down the person's sternum with some pressure. If they don't respond to that, they're likely not responsive and we want to give them NARCAN. And then the other thing that's really important to note here is this deep gurgling or rattling snore. If someone is snoring and it sounds different than usual, please try and wake them up. Unfortunately, we've heard lots of stories of individuals passing away in a family member or loved one's home because they thought the person was sleeping, but in fact that person was overdosing and in the process of dying. So if you hear a snoring that sounds a little different than usual, try and wake that person up and just check on them. If they don't wake up, administer NARCAN. I like to take this opportunity to also mention that NARCAN or naloxone is a very effective medication. Like I said, it works very quickly, but the great thing about it is it also can't do any harm if you are administered the medication and you're not in fact overdosing. So if you administered the medication to me right this second, it would be as if you were putting a saline nasal spray up my nose. So you can't cause any harm by administering it when it's not needed. So if you have any doubt, please administer the medication to see if it could possibly revive a person. This is particularly important when you think that someone might be passed out for some other reason other than opioids. Just might as well, if you can't get them to wake up, if they don't respond, go ahead and administer the NARCAN because, again, it could be an opioid overdose or the substance that they've taken might have opioids in it. Unfortunately, fentanyl has been laced in lots of different substances in our community and across the United States. So go ahead and administer it if you have any doubt. It's the same dose for children, for pregnant people, for adults of different sizes and weights. It also works on animals. You can't build up a tolerance to it. You can't take too much of it. You can't overdose from it. So go ahead and give it if you have any doubt or concern that it could be an opioid overdose. One thing to note is that Narcan or naloxone works by kicking the opioids off the receptors in our brain. It binds to the receptors and it protects our brain from having an overdose because the opioids are no longer on the receptors. The downside is it only lasts for about 30 to 90 minutes. So if there's an instance where you're not going to call 911, please make sure that you're with the person that was revived for at least an hour and a half to make sure they don't slip into an overdose, because sometimes long-lasting opioids or lots of opioids will stay in the brain and then rebind to those opioid receptors after the Narcan has worn off, which then would cause someone to have a second overdose. So we really want to make sure that we're staying with the person for at least an hour and a half to make sure they don't have a second overdose in the case that they do not accept medical treatment. Narcan is the only effective response for an overdose. It works very quickly. Like I said, 30 to 45 seconds, it's going to take effect. And it's important to note that when it takes effect, it will likely send the person into withdrawal. When the person is revived, they're likely going to be feeling pretty cruddy. They may be sweating, they may be vomiting, they may have diarrhea, they might be agitated. So after you administer the Narcan, take a step back, give the person a little bit of space, so that way they can kind of revive without someone kind of looming over them. So now we're going to talk about the steps in responding to an overdose. They're really quite simple. You check for responsiveness, doing that sternum rub, or you could do an earlobe pinch or listen for breathing. Breathing might be hard to find if the person is overdosing. And then we recommend calling 911 so that way we can get paramedics on the way, particularly if you're not 100% sure it's an opioid overdose. You really want paramedics to come so they can practice other life-saving measures for that individual. And then you're going to administer Narcan. And if you have to walk away from the person to get your Narcan, please lie them on their side, just in case they wake up while you walked away and start vomiting. That way they won't injure themselves. I am going to turn off my screen and show you the medication. So this is Narcan nasal spray. So this is what we send. And in the box, there's 2 doses. And like I said, it's quite simple to administer. So you pull the foil back off, you take out the medication, you insert it up the person's nostril, and then you spray. So you wait to spray until you've inserted it. See here, there's a little plunger. So you're going to push that plunger to administer the dose. After you've pushed the plunger, you will then dispose of this. You've administered the whole dose. In the case that you might need a second dose, you do have that second dose in your box. So there are a couple instances where you might need a second dose. One is that an hour and a half has gone by and the person has slipped into an overdose again. And the other is that the person does not respond to that first dose. This might happen sometimes if someone has taken a lot of opioids. So if they have not responded to the first dose, what we recommend is doing rescue breathing or chest compressions. If you're on the phone with 911, they'll prompt you through what to do. And then doing that for about 3 minutes and then administering the second dose. The reason we recommend rescue breathing or chest compressions or CPR even is if the person has not responded to the first dose, it is possible that they have overdosed or they're not responsive for some other thing other than opioids. Remember, Narcan only works on opioids. So we want to get some oxygen to that person's brain in the meantime while we wait for paramedics to arrive. If you're confident that the person has overdosed on opioids and they don't revive after that first dose, you can go ahead and give that second dose pretty quickly. But again, you want to give it, 30, 45 seconds for it to work before you go ahead and administer the second dose. Any questions? All right, so that's the basic training. And if you have any other questions or if you need more Narcan after you receive this dose, you can go ahead and email narcan@arlingtonva.us and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions or give you a replacement medication if you use the medication that you receive in the mail. Thank you.